Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining CNBC.
Thank you.
I want to kick off by asking you about Lebanon's economy today. You have a very high debt to GDP ratio, sitting around 150%. And you've now said that the country is in an economic emergency. Is this an economy that's on the verge of collapse?
Look, we understand that we have a problem, and we know what the problem is, and we need to fix that problem. And we have started fixing it from the budget of 2019. The problem is our fiscal deficit problem that we have had in the past years. We had a lot of talks with a lot of institutions, financial institutions, especially the IMF, and all of them are giving us advices on how to move ahead. Our strategy is to stabilize the problem that we have. The most important thing is not to deteriorate more, right? So what we're doing is fixing our debt to GDP, our deficit in the budget to 7.6% this year. We want to go down to 7% next year, or maybe a little bit less, and then, continue on stabilizing this deficit. At the same time, we're building the platform of new laws, of the PPP law that involves, a relation between the private sector and the public sector. We want to go on privatization fully in certain, areas, and this is what we're preparing. Electricity is one of our biggest problems, and we passed a strategy for the electricity. By mid or end of September, the RFP will be ready. It's being worked with the IFC and World Bank and our ministry, and we launched the bids. In the beginning of the year, we should have a winner, and then the work starts on the electricity. The problem that we have, and yesterday we had a meeting also at the Presidential Palace, where we put certain criteria that we have to reach within the coming 3 years. And this is what we're trying to do. I understand that we have a problem, but I'm extremely confident that we can get out of this problem if we follow through all the steps that we put in front of us.
Okay, so when you declare an economic emergency, generally the rule is that you bring in the IMF, you call in the cavalry. Do you have any plans to do that?
We've had the IMF here, and we've had long talks with the IMF. IMF told us what we need to do. We didn't go into a program because we feel that the procedures and the reforms that we're going to do are the same thing that the IMF are advising us to do.
But when you want them on board?
I think, the IMF has certain criteria that we cannot, especially when it comes to the Lebanese pound. This is something that we have extreme sensitivity on, IMF wants a free, Lebanese pound where people, let the market decide what kind of Lebanese pound we should have. We believe in the government and in the Minister of Finance, also the central bank we believe that keeping the Lebanese pound at 1,500 is the only stable way to move forward with all these reforms. That's the only difference that we have with the IMF. And I think today, why do we need a program if you have a SADR also program next to it that allows you to invest in the infrastructure to prepare the country on the growth path? What we need to do is the structural reforms and the financial reforms that stabilizes the country, and that will build the platform to start investing in the country. And we have so many projects that are extremely available for any investor in the world to come and invest. And today, if you look at the airport, if you look at the ports, if you look at the telecommunication, if you look at the oil and gas, which is, the first round, only Eni and Total and Novatek came to build. But this round, you have a lot of companies, international companies, who would love to come. And we have the Qataris, we have the Malaysians, we have the Omani, we have the French, we have the Italians, we have maybe American companies who are coming to invest in our oil and gas. So we're doing the reforms that we need to do to stabilize the downfall that we are going through, and once we stabilize it, then we can see the going back up. But it is a difficult moment for Lebanon. but realizing it is difficult, and the political, consensus that we have around this is what's important. If you want to go through an IMF program and you don't have political consensus, you will never reach the numbers. But if you have a political consensus on reforms that, all of them are advising you to go through, especially like S&P or the IMF or the Fitch or Moody's, they tell you what we need to do in the country, and we're doing it, then why go to the IMF?
It's tough, though, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, you have to convince the private sector, and you can keep that peg for as long as you want. And the Riyadh Saleh has done an excellent job engineering that to make it a reality. But at the end of the day, you can't legislate growth, and you got to get the private sector on board.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people in the private sector, though, are very concerned about what's been happening with the central bank.
Absolutely. Look, the problem is what today? It's financial. It's our deficit in our budget, and we are not able to stabilize it. What we did in 2019, we took a lot of measures that will stabilize this deficit in our budget. On the second hand, we have projects on privatization, whether it's the data center, whether it's the airport, whether it's the highway roads. We're looking also at toll roads, trains, all of the private sector interest. We are taking it into consideration, and we're talking to the private sector.
What about telecoms?
Sorry?
What about telecoms? Are we going to see that opening up? Because that could be a big money spinner for this country.
Absolutely. Look, if it were up to Saad Hariri today, I would privatize it tomorrow. But since I have to have a consensus here, we will have to have a public-private partnership. And this is what we are discussing in the coming 2 months. We'll arrive to a decision, and then we'll take this sector to the private sector, maybe have a golden share as a government, and see how we do the revenue share with the companies that will come forth. And we're taking advices from IFC or World Bank and others also to see how to move forward.
So a lot of people want to give you advice. And a lot of people in the private sector here, they look at Lebanon and the potential of this country, and they say
Absolutely.
the infrastructure is crumbling. This is an economy on the verge of collapse. They're worried about this peg, as I mentioned. But as you say, there are opportunities in terms of privatization.
Absolutely.
Give me specifics of what we're going to see. You say you would do the telecom sector if you could.
You will hear very good.
What else?
Yeah, you will hear very good news on the airport in the coming few weeks to come. We want to, we're discussing with the IFC how to move forward on taking the airport private, how to do a partnership, public and private. This is something that has been ongoing since the beginning, since actually a year. Now they finalized the coming few days they will finalize the numbers, and they will present it to us, and we will agree on it on the government, and then we'll take it public. And it will take it to the private sector to invest in the airport. This is one of the projects that is ready. The data center, we still are discussing with certain political parties, and I think also that is ready. We will launch it this year for the private. We need to show, like you said, the people or the international community and businesses that we are serious about privatization. And this is why also we're going into corporatization of the port, of the yesterday we had ideas also to take public Middle East because it's making money. Why we're not taking the Middle East public? Why we're not taking the casino also public? We have the regie of the regie. It's where we it's an institution that we have for tobacco that is making a lot of money. We should take it also public. So we're going down this road. We didn't have the decision in the past because we were the different political parties were didn't understand the severity of the problem that we are facing. Now they understand, and now they understand that we need to go towards this process.
Sir, what about the poor in Lebanon? Because at the end of the day, we can galvanize the private sector and get them to invest money. vested interests, lots of talk of corruption. But at the end of the day, you've got to answer to your constituents, and you've got to answer to the poverty problem in this country. So what about the poor? Because there is at this time no social safety net for them.
We have programs today that we work on the poorest in Lebanon. And this is in collaboration with Germany, with Great Britain. They put a lot of money in this fund, and we are working a social program for all these extremely poor people in Lebanon. And in Tripoli, for instance, it's named the poorest city on the Mediterranean. So a lot of these programs are going into these cities, and in Akkar also you have, in the Biqa' you have also. You have almost about 40,000 families that need this kind of help. And this is something we've reached about 15 to 18,000 so far with our program, and we want to reach the 40,000 hopefully by the end of 2020 or mid-2021.
But a social safety net, an ability for folks to have a second chance as they age, that the public system is going to take care of them.
The pension fund, you mean, and we are doing the reform. This reform of the pension fund is finally finalized by the Ministry of Finance. We were working also with the World Bank. It will be presented to the government I think in 1 month, and we will pass it by the government and then take it to the parliament to be approved by parliament. So we're working on the pension reforms. Also, you have the pension for the elderly, and this is something that is extremely important. It is in the parliament. The government has sent it to the parliament. We're working with parliament very closely to finalize this. We call it Daman al-Shaykh, which is the pension for the elderly, and this is a program that is already in the parliament, and we should finalize it by the end of the year.
Walk me through the challenges in your mind to achieving what you're trying to achieve, because at the end of the day, as you say, Saad Hariri, you're one man, you're one political party, you've got a lot of folks to keep happy in order to get these things done and accomplished. Who are the partners that you see? What are the challenges?
Look, the challenge is the region, to be honest with you. What we suffer in Lebanon is not only us that are suffering from this. Everybody knows that this global economy also is, slowing down because of the trade war that is happening. All of this is hurting also Lebanon. But from another, perspective, it also helps our deficit and our budget because, the prices are going to go down, the oil is already down. So these are things that are good for us. But when it comes to growth, this is another problem for us because we need people to invest in Lebanon. That's why it's a problem. At the same time, if you look at, the interest rate would remain the same for us. So interest rate, if it goes lower because of this
help
recession,
out from the president, really.
Yeah. So all of this is helping us, but the challenge really, to be honest with you, is how do you manage a country with 1.5 million refugees also? And this is a burden. If you look at the
Do you feel
United
the international
Nations,
community has a responsibility that they're not fulfilling?
They're not fulfilling. To be honest with you, they're fulfilling part of it. I'm not saying they're not fulfilling, but is it enough? If the United Nations comes out or the World Bank comes out with a report that until 2017, the refugee problem cost Lebanon $17 billion, and I only get $6 billion, it tells you there is a gap. So, and this is 2015. Now we are 2019, and you can imagine the cost is higher today, and the problems are bigger today. Plus, you have more tension. This is one of the challenges.
Do you believe these folks will ever be able to return home?
Oh, they will return.
You believe that?
Return. They have a country. They're not. You see.
But if they're in danger, they're not going to leave.
Of course, they're not going to leave. But the difference between them and the Palestinians don't have a state today. And there's this huge sensitivity with Israel and all of the problems, the baggage that comes with it. But with the Syrian, yes, there is a regime, and I believe that regime eventually will be forced to return, to have his people return into Syria, whether through the Russians, through the agreement between the Americans and the Russians, and all of that. But I truly believe that if you ask any refugee today, in Lebanon or in Turkey or in Jordan or in Iraq, you ask them, do you want to go back to Syria? They will tell you yes, but they're afraid. And now, they're afraid today, but as Lebanese were afraid when we had the civil war, most of them came back, a lot of them came back, some of them didn't come back. But I truly believe the people who are the refugees who are in Lebanon will go back to Syria.
Speaking of Lebanon within this context, when I speak to investors, when I speak to people on the street, families that I know, raising kids in this country, there is a fear there.
Yeah.
What is your message to them? Because they're not just afraid of the regional situation.
Look, I am
but they're
confident.
afraid the government doesn't have a handle on this.
No, I am confident that we have a handle on that. The problem we had in the past, Hadley, was that people didn't realize the economical problem that we have and the debt that we have. People thought, it's okay, we can, manage, and Saad is here, and all of that. What they didn't understand is that we have to change the way we work. And this is what we've been saying since day one in 2017. Also, going to Saad, this is what we Lebanese, me, myself, I put and said we need to do these reforms. It's not because the IMF asked me or Monsieur Ducan asked me, because I believe that we should change. We cannot, I cannot have a commercial law was done in 1953 and still working on it. And today you have startups and you have all this, new digital economy that is, and we want to make Lebanon a digital Lebanon. So
to do that, you got to get the internet working.
Yes, but we have invested about $700 million for the platform, in fiber optics, in LTE, in everything that to prepare us to be a digital government. We started in mid-2017 or end of 2017. By end of this year, we'll have covered 30% of the Lebanese territory in fiber optics. By next year, we would have covered about 80% of Lebanese territories, and to 2021, we would have covered 100% of Lebanese territory with the fiber optic. This is something this is why I'm saying, stabilize the country, the our fiscal problems, invest in the infrastructure, and prepare the country for the digital economy that we want to pursue. We want to also fight corruption. We have a real serious corruption problem.
I want to ask you about that.
Sure.
You do indeed have a corruption problem.
Yes.
It's something that is discussed quite widely and very publicly, as you're mentioning it now. Are you willing to put together a commission, potentially, that answers to the parliament?
Absolutely. We are ready to do everything, and this is why in Sadr we decided to issue 4 laws. Those laws to protect the whistleblower. This is finished. To have a commission for the anti-corruption in the government, a commission to prosecute those who corrupt, and also we nominated in Parliament the High Commission who will prosecute ministers, prime ministers, any member of the government, and we just did it a month ago. So all the tools to fight corruption are there. Now we have to make them function. We have to. We appointed the last 2. We need to appoint the first 2.
So when we talk about corruption, and it's a systemic problem. What's the timeline there? Because you say you're willing to put together a coalition and a group of people who will be checking and back-checking, they'll be working on this. But at the same point, you've got to have a timeline to say, we will eradicate corruption by when? What's your timeline?
I think, eradicating corruption...
It's part of the privatization, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that's going to go through, especially from Sadr, and on the privatization, will have special committees, following the transparency, whether it's from the creditors, because what we did in Saad, we asked to have a committee to follow up all these projects and to make sure that there is full transparency on these projects. On the other hand, how do you get rid of corruption in a country like Lebanon that is confessional? And this is one of the hardest questions, and I'm glad you asked them. All political parties need to understand they need to stop protecting on the basis of confessions. And they need to let those who make this corruption pay for the corruption, go to courts and go through the procedure. In the past, because we were so divided in the country, especially after the assassination of my father, there was such divide, nobody was willing in the country to let go of one of their confession to courts. Now you will find, let's say, take the justice ministry. Today you have about 10 judges who are going through prosecution because of corruption. And this is the beginning. You have, imagine we had a committee.
Is it just a slap on the wrist and then we see them back in the job in a couple of years?
No, you will see them fired. These people are going to be fired.
So you're committed to saying that's it?
Yeah, that's it. For us, that's it. Just to tell you, we had a committee that was formed, a law that formed a committee to prosecute, employees in the government. This committee was made in 1955 or something, or 58. It has never stopped one employee. Since this new government, we have stopped about 70 employees, and we're continuing. This is a process that's going to take time. But let me tell you also what helps fighting corruption is having a digital economy and having an e-government. Because the problem is this Lebanese citizen is going from one place to another place with his papers to get things done. And if you have an e-government, you don't need to do all of that, and you will cut all this corruption that is there already. So we are fighting corruption. We are at the beginning, but I truly believe by the end of 2021, or mid-22, we would have finished, or we would have gotten rid of a lot of those corrupt people in Lebanon.
Well, what about the percentage there? What are we saying? Cut corruption by half by 2020?
More. I hope by more. I think we should cut corruption by 60%, 70% in 2 years. With the work that we're doing, I think this is where we're going to get at.
I'm going to hold you to those numbers.
Yeah, hold me to those numbers.
I'll be back and we'll talk about it.
And talk and ask me about it. And I'll tell you how many people are in jail.
Walk me through your partners when it comes to the international community, because the folks that I speak to, Lebanese and foreign investors as well, look at this economy and say there is a lot we could do, but the political situation is no doubt tied to the geopolitical situation. And when we talk about the situation in Syria, when we talk about the situation to the south in Israel, when we talk about the Middle East generally, who do you see as your partners in this region?
Look, I should see everyone as a partner in this region. If I want to be, purely focused on the Lebanese interest, there are differences in the region, with Iran and what's happening between Iran and the world and all that. But it doesn't mean if there is change in this whole process or this whole tension that Iran shouldn't be a partner, or you will find partnerships between the Gulf and Iran. And eventually, this is how. My problem with this whole issue, to be honest with you, and I'm going to be very blunt, I find in the Arab world we are too busy fighting each other instead of focusing on what really matters is the citizen. That's one. Two, I find that real wars today are economic wars. This is what's happening in this region is out of fashion, and it's crazy, and I believe is outdated. What we need to do in this Middle East is focus on our potentials and what we can do, and also on what the Arab world can do.
But it's kind of
tough. And this is where I commend what President Sisi is doing in Egypt, what MBS is doing in Saudi Arabia. There is a lot of, but if you take the case of Egypt and how much Egypt is working on its economy and how much reforms they are doing and how much they did in electricity, this is what we need to do in Lebanon.
So often folks would say, and quite rightly, that that's come at a huge cost for the public. The public had to take a major haircut. to do that in terms of the reforms and how that has impacted having to devalue the currency there, but also in terms of human rights. I mean, to do that, you've got to be a strong man, and that's what we see in Egypt, and that's what we see in Saudi Arabia.
That's why we have to find the balance here in Lebanon, because we cannot do this like everywhere else. But I believe in Lebanon we have this special equilibrium between confessions. People think they are majorities and minorities. We're all minorities in the country. Muslims are minorities and Christians are minorities. And this is how people should think. But I truly believe that the problem here in the region is this tension that you have in this region. My allies in the country, I believe, if I look back in 2017, end of 2016, when we forged this new alliance between all of us and this consensus, it was very, unclear, waters that I was walking into. But today, I truly believe that everyone is conscious that there is a problem. Everyone wants to take action. The issue is how to combine all our efforts in, one big package of reform that will cover all the things that we need to do. It's going to be tough, okay, but it's worth the hours, and it's worth the tiredness that we're going to go through, and it's worth the risk, because we will have demonstrations in Lebanon, and I'm saying it from now. But let's have it one time, and that's it.
What is the haircut going to look like? Because you're saying you're not going to devalue the pound.
Yeah.
What does this mean for the average Lebanese? What's the haircut? How hard is this going to be?
Look, if we fix electricity, okay, we said this year, we usually pay $2 billion in subsidy. We decided yesterday in the presidential palace, we will pay $1 billion. And we have to live with this $1 billion of subsidy. Whether we reach our goal, if we don't reach our goal by mid or the second quarter or third quarter, then we will have shortage of electricity. We cannot borrow more. Full stop. This is what we have to do. When it comes to taking the decisions on privatization, telling the private sector that we are ready for you, airport, ports, telecommunication, data center, things like this that are important for the private sector. Like this, they have the platform that they need to do, they need to have to grow the economy themselves. And plus, while you do all this austerity program, you have one big benefit on that is there, which is Sadr. From one place, from one side, you're doing an austerity program in your budget, but on the other side, you have all these projects from Sadr that will, for each $1 billion that you spend in this country, it's 1% of growth. So if we do Sadr like we're supposed to, achieve it, then there will be growth, and this austerity program will be, it will go in parallel with the growth.
How soon are you going to be able to unlock that money in terms of the $11 billion in commitments?
Dukan today is in Lebanon. Tomorrow I'm going to be meeting with him to finalize the last touches. I will be going to Paris, and then I'll be going also to Germany. I'll be going also to Abu Dhabi to finalize the agreements between the Lebanese government and the Emirati government. Also, we'll be going to Saudi Arabia also to finalize agreements between us and Saudi Arabia.
Because the finance minister back in January told me he was with with Lebanon all the way.
Yeah.
But that money isn't here yet. You're going to get it.
Yeah, we're going to go get it. We're going to go get it. We want them to invest in Lebanon, and we want Lebanese also to invest in Saudi Arabia, because we have a lot of capital also. And you have the Lebanese diaspora also that is all over the world, that, like you said, when you go to London, when you go to France, you see them, you talk to them, and they're willing to come and invest in Lebanon, but they need the right, stability and the right reforms. If they see that we're doing all of this, then it's only a matter of time that they come and turn the wheel around.
And walk me through this, because at the end of the day, you say, you're not in a position, you admire the strong men and what they've achieved. You're not in a position here in Lebanon to do the same thing as a Sisi would do, as an MBS would do. But at the end of the day, you also have to contend with, as we say, geopolitical issues. How tough is it for you when you have the United States, which is in many ways a partner of Lebanon, strong-arming the regime in Tehran and creating, according to many folks that I speak to in the GCC in particular, a myriad of problems in the Persian Gulf. That has an impact on oil prices, that has an impact on stability, on the potential for growth in Asia. How tough is that for you? Because this isn't a problem that's local. This is happening here at home.
The only thing about all of this that scares me is a war.
How close are we to that?
I don't know. And I don't think anybody wants a war.
Is it a possibility?
It's a possibility like any other possibility, but I think it's a smaller possibility than going to talks. And because I believe President Trump wants to talk, and I believe the Iranians want to talk, and I believe the Gulf wants, to end this.
Because they realize the United States isn't going to back them up if they go after Iran.
Yeah, because in the end, people want stability, and countries need stability. For us in Lebanon, like you said, the challenge when we were divided was extremely hard. But when we elected President Aoun, it broke all the alliances, that we had in the past. And it just molded Lebanon into new alliances. These alliances were, basically, we're trying to work since 2017-18. But today, they all realize one thing. If we do not do the reforms, regardless of the regional problems, regardless of your regional backups and your regional friends or your regional whatever, we have to do it to ourselves. And this is what's good. They understand that we need to do these steps.
When I speak to investors, those here in Lebanon, they live here in the country, they believe in this country, they're hopeful about this country, but they're still not willing to invest. They talk to me and they say, I ask them all these questions, and they say, Lebanon doesn't need external enemies because Lebanon, their greatest enemy is the Lebanese.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with them. That's the main problem that we have. But,
So your greatest enemy is yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it hurts me when I see other people talking about Lebanon from different nationalities and how much they love Lebanon and how much they, cherish Lebanon. And I see what we do sometimes in our own country. Lebanese have been through civil war, through, Syrian regime occupying Lebanon, and then the assassination of my father. And I think truly in the past 3 years is the first time we Lebanese are running the country ourselves, figuring things out by ourselves. And I truly believe the past month and a half, especially, when we were following S&P and Fitch, and we were working really hard not to be downgraded with Fitch or S&P. I think we focused more on S&P than Fitch. But anyway, we focused. Why? Because we really are confident that these reforms are going to be made. Because people realize today more than ever that we cannot continue the same way.
What do you say to those private investors who say, listen, we like you very well, but we don't buy your numbers. We don't believe that the peg is going to help. And frankly, it's actually working against you, keeping that peg to the dollar. And frankly, when it comes to corruption, we just don't buy it. We just don't buy the ability of the government, your government, to help.
No, but I think, investor needs to see real steps taken.
Okay? And they're going to see that. How soon?
They're going to see that. This is why I'm saying, the meeting yesterday was extremely important. We will present the budget hopefully next week and to the government, and we'll start working. I think by 2-3 weeks we should finish from the budget, send it to the parliament. And in that budget there will be a lot of reforms, and plus there will be a lot of laws that will follow these reforms. S&P gave us 6 months, right? And we are going to use this 6 months to pass every single reform that we should pass in Lebanon.
You believe
and
you have
I
the political
asked the
support.
investors, and I asked these investors to sit and watch us, and you will see. And like the S&P gave us this chance, I tell them, if S&P gave us this chance, give us this chance, and you will see that we will. I am confident that we will reach those numbers.
You were just in Washington.
Yeah.
Had a series of meetings. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his wife paid you a visit at your home. What were some of the agreements that you walked away with? What did you achieve out of those meetings?
Look, I always, whenever I travel, I'd always try to present Lebanon's story, case. Lebanon is is one of the smallest countries in the world. It has 18 confessions. It has 1.5 million refugees with a population of 4.5 million. You know, when I watch TV sometimes and I watch on Europeans are, fed up of refugees, or, the United States is building a wall, and I look at myself in my country and I laugh, and I say, we received 1.5 million and you're reacting like this? And I truly believe that in that sense, people have lost, in one way or the other, their humanity. These are people. These are babies and children and people who ran from war and use them in politics for populist movements. I truly believe this is something that, we're going back in history.
Well, the president says, build a wall, keep them out.
Okay, this is their policy. What I'm saying is what I think. When I see myself, getting 1.5 million refugee in my country, and I want them to leave yesterday. I don't want them to stay. But Lebanon is suffering all of this, and yet we are going to make these reforms and we're going to reach them. The biggest problem I have is, the region and the global economy that is, slowing down, and everybody's saying, on your channel also, there is maybe a recession or something like this that's going to come. This doesn't help also. But I truly believe that we're going to make all the right steps.
Many would say that the President of the United States is to blame for this potential recession.
Well, everybody wants to blame everybody. I think the President is doing what he thinks is best for his country, and that's what he thinks he's doing. And I'm not here to blame him or not blame him, but I think, the consequences of things boils down to something.
And your word is going to hit Lebanon.
I think, people should realize that Lebanon is part of this world, and we're doing what we can do, and that's why and always take into consideration, and I keep telling all the international institutions, you come and give me all these solutions, which are, beautiful, but give me a solution for the 1.5 million refugees. Nobody says anything. How do you manage a country with 1.5 million refugees? You're doing a public service for the international community, because if I were to be, a populist, I would say, here's the sea, go to Europe, go to here, go to there. And I will start, I wouldn't have this problem like I have today. But we're not like this. We're people who receive those refugees. What I'm trying to say is, everybody gives you a solution. But in the end, I think we have a consensus today in this country on a lot of those reforms, and we can move forward on them.
So the United States has put Lebanon's financial health and their financial sector in the crosshairs when it comes to taking on Tehran. Because at the end of the day, you don't think so. By targeting banks that they say are running Hezbollah money, and of course Hezbollah, a U.S. designated terrorist organization, doesn't that make your job difficult?
It does make my job difficult, but also, America has been very clear about this. So if a bank plays in those waters, you should expect the consequences of these, actions. You cannot use a financial system that, not only America. I mean, I think Europe has the same rules, and everybody has the same rules when it comes to Hezbollah money or to money laundering or whatever it is. It's there. If a bank, misuses this trust, we don't like it, definitely. We try to stop it. I tried to stop it. I tried to delay it. But rules are rules, and they had to take this action. And do I like it? No, I don't like it. But I wish this bank didn't go through what they did.
In terms of what happens next in this country, you've got to find partners. You talked about your international partners when it comes to helping the Lebanese economy get back on its feet. Mm-hmm. You've talked about your internal partners as well. There are big questions in the mind of the investors that I've been speaking to, particularly over the last several days, about Hezbollah and the fact that they seem to be operating autonomously from your government, yet your government will pay the price for their actions.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Look, Hezbollah is not a Lebanese problem only. It's a regional problem. Israel wants to have, this scenario, Lebanon is responsible, blah, 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 what Netanyahu says, and you want to buy it, go ahead, buy it. But he knows, and the international community knows, that this is not true. We do not agree with Hezbollah on these actions. I do not agree with Hezbollah on these actions.
But can you stop them?
At the same time, I am a pragmatic person, and I know my limits, and I know the limits of this region. If people were serious about this issue, they would have done things 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. Now, maybe they started to do something. It's not my problem that Hezbollah became this strong. It's not my fault that Hezbollah became this strong. But to tell me that Hezbollah is running the government, no, Hezbollah is not running the government. Sorry. We are running the government. I am running the government. President Aoun is running the government with me as president. Nabih Berri as Speaker of the House. They're a political party. They have their size in the government, and they have their size in the parliament. They do not run the country. But what they control is maybe a flare or a war that might happen for regional reasons that we have no say in it in Lebanon. And this is the big quarrel between us and them. And this is where I tell you, my logic is, what do I do as a Prime Minister? Do I sit and fight Hezbollah day and night on this issue? Or do I make all the reforms that are needed for the country, strengthen my institutions, strengthen my LAF, my ISF, my central bank, all my security forces, make a government, strong central government, and then also at the same time the President has decided to open a strategic dialogue for how to defend Lebanon from any intrusion or wars. And we sit on the table and discuss things calmly. This is an issue that will take time. People will say, oh, wallah, this dialogue will not lead to anything. Maybe. In the beginning, it will not lead to anything. But I will assure you, in the end, it will lead to something.
Prime Minister, investors are funny when it comes to risk. Some risks are worth taking. Is Lebanon a worth risk?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Because we have, in our DNA, entrepreneurship, the Lebanese, wherever you find them, and you travel the world, you will find Lebanese in London, in France, in America, in Australia, in Asia, in Africa, everywhere they thrive, they do well. We have this entrepreneurship within ourselves. We have this new also startups, in BDD, you have 1,500 intelligent young men and women who are doing amazing job for, technology, and they're moving ahead. I think we have so much potential. All we need to do is renew our laws, do the reforms that we have to do, and prepare the platform for the technology sector so they can do what they have to do.
One member of the Lebanese community who's done extremely well globally, we speak to him often on CNBC, and has been a great friend to Lebanon. Carlos Ghosn finds himself in a world of trouble and a world of pain right now. What is your commitment to him?
We are following the case. I talk to his family. They have lawyers. They're taking care of this. And anything they need from us, we will do. I think this is a legal case in Japan. Lebanese government cannot, do much about it. We can give support to the family. We can talk to the Japanese government. But in the end of the day, this is a Japanese issue that his lawyers are dealing with. We support him. We hope that he gets out as soon as possible.
Were you concerned by the way that this case has gone? Because it's quite irregular.
Sorry? Yeah, it is. But, as Prime Minister of Lebanon, I will rest to say, let's sit and watch and see where it goes.
And finally, sir, your late father
Yeah.
was very well known within the business community for being someone whose word was his bond. And if he said to trust him on something, investors knew that he was going to get it done. How would you respond to those who would say the son isn't the father?
Of course, the son is not the father. My father was somebody who was self-achieved, who did a lot, in his life. He was nothing. He became somebody, billionaire. He worked very hard. My circumstances are different. My circumstances, I had this father who was there for me, and then all of a sudden he's not. And he was assassinated. And what is expected of me is to be like him. I try very hard. I don't, I never say that I am like him. I try to go by his legacy and to solve issues in the country through how he used to think and his ideology. And my father's ideology was, in order to get things done, you need to make alliances in this country.
You got to work together.
And you have to work together. What I did is the same thing. In the past he worked with Hezbollah, he worked with Amal, he worked with, even the Syrian regime was here in the country and they were doing everything to stop him. And he worked. The difference was when he got assassinated, the country got divided. And that was the biggest problem. How do you break this division? In 2017, we broke that division. And now we're progressing towards a better Lebanon and to a digital Lebanon.
How do you think he'd feel about the situation today?
Look, if he is here and he sees the region like this, he would be very disappointed. Because, we weren't like this. In 2005, before his assassination, we didn't have civil wars around the Arab world. We didn't have all these problems. Today, it's a totally different Arab world. It's a totally different region. The alliances are different. The tension is so high. And this is due to, unsolved problems. And we're not sitting on the table and solving them among each other.
Are you more pessimistic or optimistic?
No, optimistic.
In spite of everything
that
you've just said.
I think the region is going through a tough time, yes, but I think this tension is at its peak, and as of now you'll start seeing it descending. I hope.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining CNBC.
Thank you.